In this video, we'll be going over server and client communication. And if you didn't know, that's basically like the essential building block for every game, especially in Roblox Studio. And this is applicable to like almost any multiplayer kind of game engine or game that includes multiplayer. And anyways, we have two random weird blocks in front of me and a GUI on my left hand side. And in case you didn't know, GUI typically is on the client side, and usually everything in the workspace is on the server side. Over here is not on the client side because it actually is in the workspace. And another clarification is that the character you see over here is not the player or client. You can think of it as a visual representation of the client, and it actually is on the server. So anyways, I'm going to go through a quick little demonstration of client to server communication. So for client to server communication, I have this GUI on the left hand side, and I can type a message here. So I'm just going to say hello server, and the second I click this button, you'll notice the output text will change. So there's two important things here. So one, my player name is here, don't mind that, I made it a long time ago. And then two, the message I inputted into the client made it all the way to the server and is represented within this billboard GUI. So I can change it again to random letters if I want to, and you can see that the server is updating whatever my input is. Now for the opposite, so server to client, it's a little bit different. So this block has a proximity prompt in it, and the proximity prompts are server-sided. So when I interact with this proximity prompt, it counts as server to client. You'll notice that the text at the bottom changed, and that is a representation of server to client communication. So anyways, let's take a quick look into a diagram that will help us identify everything more clearly. Okay, so first of all, we're going to start with the very basics. So how does a player move its character, and how can everyone else see that? So to begin with, let's say right now we are player 1. If I want to move right, I'm going to press the D key on my keyboard, and as a result, the client will talk to the server, and the server will tell everyone that client 1, their character, so their character moved to the right. And once the server receives that message that client 1 wants to move their player to the right, they'll send the updated position of the character to every single client. So once that's done, everyone will see that client 1's character is moved to the right a bit. Now let's take a look on how exactly the demonstration I showed earlier works. So once again, we're going to say we're player 1. I'm going to draw a little box here to display the output text. So this is output. Okay, so let's say this player is interacting with their GUI, which is of course on the client side. once they input the text onto their client side and they hit the button, the text is going to be sent from the client to the server, and from the server it will be added onto the output. And for that to happen, or for that to be displayed to every single client, the text has to be sent to client 4, to client 3, and client 2. And specifically what it does is there is a copy of the output block and label on every single one of the client screens. And all it's doing is changing the text on each of their copy of the output block or label. So now let's do the opposite. So we'll do server to client communication. And if you see over here, there's a proximity prompt and there's a character. So I'm just gonna write it a C so you don't get confused. Actually, that doesn't really help because clients also start with that. Okay, so whenever a character inputs E, I guess, next to a proximity prompt, the server will get a signal that the proximity prompt is initially activated, and then it's gonna see who actually activated the proximity prompt, but that's not really specific. This is really specific to this scenario because of, I guess, the features that a proximity prompt allows us to use. But anyways, since we know which player used the proximity prompt, we're gonna send a message only to player 1, and it's gonna send its message, and client 1's GUI will update. However, if client 4, 3, and 2 check at their GUI, it will not be the same as player 1's. So we're going to test this out by having 2 clients in 1 server. And this is something you can do to, I guess, test out whatever you want in Roblox Studio. So with this, we'll have a local server and 2 local clients. Okay, so you see 2 players on both sides of the screen. And for example, if I press D, you'll see that the server will update the player on both our screen and their screen. So anyways, let's walk over to the output text on the screen, and same with here. And just a side note, player or local testing is way laggier than it actually is. So if you're like concerned about how your game's performance is looking like, try team test. Okay, so on the left hand side, I'm gonna type a message to send to the server, and you'll notice on the right hand screen and on the left hand screen the text will be updated. Okay, so you notice that my player name is there and the message I sent on both screens are there. And I'll do the same on the other side. And player 1 said something that you guys should all do if you're watching it. Subscribe. And you can notice that the text appears on both player 1 and player 2 screens. Now we could also check the server. So this is the server that these 2 clients are connected to, and even over here it works. Okay, so now let's check out the server to client communication. So player 1 is going to interact with this server to client communication, and we'll see if the text label changes. So as you can see, it only changes on player 1 screen, and that's because the server to client communication is only communicating with 1 client. So if we do it with player 2, a similar text will appear, but the name is different, right? let's go over what important things you need to know to enable this in your own games. So first things first is we're going to need remote events. And you can add a remote event by clicking the plus button, and by default it should be there, or you can just type in a remote event. Typically you want remote events to be stored in replicated storage. Usually I really like having a folder called events and having all my remote events under that folder just to be organized. You can then rename your event to its specific reason or purpose. And the reason why the reason why the events are stored in replicated storage is because replicated storage can be accessed by the server and clients. Hence, that's why it's called replicated storage, because it's replicated on the clients and server. Anyways, so let's look at the code that I have for this setup and see how exactly we use this event. Okay, so this is a local script, and local scripts are blue and they're always on the client side. Server scripts are white and they're always on the server side. So this local script controls this button, and whenever this button is activated, it'll send the event, the remote event, it'll fire it to the server, and it'll pass in the respective arguments towards the server. So really, to fire a message from the client side to the server side, all you have to do is, well, first of all, get a variable that is the remote event you created. So for me, it's in replicated storage and under the events folder and called send message. Then all you want to do is type the event name and then : fire server. And within these parentheses, you want to pass in any arguments you like. It's important to remember that the player argument is sent regardless, so do not include the player argument inside these parentheses unless you want two of them, I guess. And we can take a look of what I mean exactly. So this script handles the server side on updating the output text. So to connect to an event, all you have to do is type in the event name, and then you're going to do .on server event, and then : connect function, and by default you should have the player parameter as your first parameter, so it's important for it to be your first. Then the other parameters are going to be whatever you set it to be. So in my specific scenario, it's message, which is the data type of a string, and then you're going to go to in between these two parentheses and click enter. And within the end and the send message event is whatever code you want to run whenever the event is fired and connected to the server. So as you can see, whenever this event is fired to the server, the output label text changes corresponding to the message that's inputted. And as you can see that there are no arguments made for the player, it's just automatic. Now let's look at the server to client communication. So to fire a event to the client, we can use the same event. However, in this case, there's two options you could use to communicate with clients. So by default, for our scenario, we use fire client, and that is used to send a message or whatever you want specifically only to one client. You can also do send message event fire all clients. And as you could guess, this will fire the event to every client connected to the server. So if we were to do this, whenever a player would interact with this proximity prompt here, everyone in the games, all their UI text will change to hi. Now let's look on how to connect the event on the client side. So right over here, you can notice that you just do the event name dot on client event :connect function, and you don't need the player parameter by default, but you do need to input any parameters you make yourself. So in this scenario, I have the message parameter because that is the argument I pass. This is the message. And you can see that I'm changing the text over here and under this event, or connecting the signal. Another thing that's helpful is if you look at your output. So let's send a message to the server really quick. Okay, so we're going to send a message blue to the server. And if we look at our output, I have two print statements, one in the client side script and one in the server script. If you look at the output, anything that's printed from the client side is blue, and it also has a client kind of label on it. And it's the opposite for the server, so you can see that it's green and has the server label on it. So that is useful if you want to check which script or which object is on the server or client. Anyways, thanks for watching, and if you found this video helpful, informative, or I don't know, maybe it was entertaining too, then please subscribe, like. You can comment down below what video you want to see next and what topic I should go for next.